If everything currently circulating about the iPhone 18 Pro Max holds up, this could genuinely be one of Apple's most significant upgrades in years. Not since the introduction of the Pro naming convention itself has there been quite this much smoke pointing toward fire. Multiple independent supply chain sources, display analysts, and camera module leakers converging on a similar picture of what Apple is preparing to ship. This piece walks through what actually living with this phone might look like based on everything leaked so far, section by section, feature by feature, so that by the time pre-orders open you have a realistic sense of what you're deciding on rather than just a headline spec sheet. It's worth being upfront about the nature of this kind of coverage before diving in. Leaks are not announcements. They come from component suppliers, assembly line sources, patent filings, and analysts who track Apple's supply chain the way meteorologists track pressure systems. With real data, but also real uncertainty about what survives to launch day unchanged. Some of what follows has been corroborated by multiple sources and should be treated as close to settled. Other elements are still single-sourced or based on early engineering samples that could shift before mass production ramps up. Where that distinction matters, it's called out explicitly. With that caveat in place, let's get into what's actually being described. Every iPhone cycle gets described as the big one by somebody, and skepticism toward that framing is healthy. But there's a specific reason this year's leaks read differently than the usual incremental refresh chatter. In most recent cycles, the headline changes have clustered around one area at a time. A camera bump one year, a chip jump the next, a design tweak the year after that. What's unusual about the iPhone 18 Pro Max leaks is that they touch nearly every major subsystem simultaneously. Display, camera, chip, battery, modem, and industrial design all appear to be moving at once. That's the kind of alignment that tends to happen every 3 or 4 generations, when Apple has had enough time to bank up several parallel engineering efforts and ship them together rather than staggering them. It also lines up with the broader rhythm of Apple's product roadmap. The company has historically saved its most substantial camera and display architecture changes for years when it's also refreshing its custom silicon on a new process node, since those two efforts pull from overlapping engineering and manufacturing resources. A new modem generation piling on top of that is less common, which is part of why the C2 modem details have generated as much discussion as the aperture camera has. None of this guarantees a flawless launch. Ambitious generations also carry more risk. More novel components means more potential yield issues, more potential software bugs in year one, and historically, a higher chance of at least one feature slipping to a later software update rather than shipping fully baked on day one. Keep that in mind as a general pattern while reading through what's being reported. Design-wise, the phone keeps a familiar silhouette. Anyone expecting a dramatic new form factor, a fold, a slide, a radically different aspect ratio, should adjust expectations now. This is very much an evolution of the existing Pro Max shape. Flat edges, a similar footprint, and a display that dominates nearly the entire front face. But a few details shift the overall feel in ways that will be immediately noticeable the moment you pick the phone up and turn on the screen. The most talked about change is the screen cutout at the top, which is reportedly noticeably smaller thanks to a redesigned Face ID system. For years, the pill-shaped cutout housing the True Depth camera array has been treated as an unavoidable tax on screen space, a necessary sacrifice for secure facial recognition that competitors sidestepped with less secure alternatives like simple 2D facial unlock or in-display fingerprint readers. Apple has spent several generations shrinking that cutout incrementally, moving from a wide notch to a smaller pill, but this year's change reportedly comes from a genuinely different approach rather than further miniaturization of the same components. According to the leaks, the flood illuminator, the component responsible for projecting the infrared dot pattern used to map your face in 3 dimensions, has moved underneath the display glass itself, rather than sitting visibly inside the cutout as it has on every Face ID iPhone to date. This is a meaningfully harder engineering problem than it sounds. Infrared light has to pass through the display stack without being scattered or absorbed in a way that degrades the accuracy of the depth map, and the display panel itself has to be engineered with a section that's effectively transparent to infrared wavelengths while remaining fully functional as a normal, bright, color-accurate area of the screen for everyday content. Apple has reportedly been developing display-embedded sensor technology for several years, having already shipped an under-display Face ID, No, to be precise, under-display Touch ID on other product lines and refined always-on display technology that requires similarly exotic panel engineering. In daily use, the practical result of this change is straightforward even if the underlying engineering isn't. More visible screen when watching video, browsing, or gaming without giving up